Welcome everyone to another episode of Get Tech Smart. I am your host, Flo Nicholas, and it's another great episode where we're going to talk all things techie. But this tech is a little different. I've had an episode before where I talked about green technology, specifically solar panels. Today, it's an update because there's been a lot of changes in the green technology industry. And while I am here to update you on those changes, and I am happy to introduce you to Dan Weeks. Welcome to the Get Tech Smart Show. You are the VP of Business Development at Revision. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to just tell us, well, who are you?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Flo. It's an honor to be on the show. I appreciate all you do to educate our community and the wider community about important tech topics. And I'm honored to be in the green tech space with a company, an employee-owned solar company called Revision Energy. We've been installing, designing, engineering, installing, maintaining solar PV systems for the last 20 years. And the tech has evolved a lot since then. Not just rooftop solar panels, but also integrated battery storage systems to give you power when the power goes out and also provide grid services. We also do electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We know the EV trend has taken off, and we do thermal systems to heat and cool your homes. All of it is part of this exciting vision that isn't unique to us these days. A lot of people are talking about the move toward beneficial electrification, where we can power all of our human needs from heating and cooling to transportation to everyday electricity with clean, renewable energy sources through electricity instead of needing to burn fossil fuels to do all of that. So we're excited about how the technology has evolved to a point, as I'm sure we'll talk about, where it's actually saving folks money to get off of fossil fuels and to go with green technologies. And for me personally, I've been doing this work, kind of got started way back in the 90s in high school when my high school here in southern New Hampshire had a solar car team. And we were piloting some of this technology when it was still wicked expensive and not that efficient, but it's moved tremendously since then. And at Revision, like I said, we've been going 20 years. I've been part of the company for the last several years, and we have a great team of 400 employee owners who do everything from bring in the business, tell the stories, engage the community, to design and engineer the systems, to install the systems, and then maintain them for their 40-plus year lifespan.
Right, and I mean, I think you're so right. There is so much going on right now. We're hearing the words of clean energy and clean technology. There is this huge movement to make better decisions in terms of how we're heating and powering our homes. But let's just be real right now, right? Things are expensive.
Oh yeah.
I just told you before we started recording, I went to 3 grocery stores just to get good deals on fruit and snacks for the kids. And last year, we saw an increase in energy. And I looked at my bill and I said, my kids are going to start working. I don't care. Even the 4-year-old is going to get a job. It's ridiculous. But I still feel like there are some people who still think that putting solar panels, for example, is very expensive. But on the contrary, I feel like it's now affordable, and it's been made to be affordable. So a lot of people might not know this, and we're going to jump into detail about this, the Inflation Reduction Act. Let's talk a little bit about that and how there are incentives there for individuals to be able to actually install solar panels, and the benefits to companies like yourself for getting also some money back in terms of incentives too.
Yeah, great question, and couldn't agree with you more. Life is expensive. We've also got 3 little kids, as you know, and they eat and they have all their needs, so we're always looking for ways to save money, and that's true of pretty much everybody. The first thing that's probably goes without saying, but it's maybe worth repeating about solar. What makes solar and other renewable energy sources inherently cheaper is the fact that, and honestly, I say I'm lucky to be in an industry where the fuel source is free. Sunlight is
right.
We take those photons, we excite the electrons, we create an electrical current, we make power. The input is literally free. It
Right.
just falls on us every day. And in fact, this is kind of a crazy stat. When I first heard it, I couldn't believe it. But in 1 hour on planet Earth, we get enough sunlight hitting the surface of the Earth to power human needs for a year.
Wow.
If we were to harness it all. And of course, we can't harness it. We don't need to harness it all. But that's the abundance of this resource. Even in northern climes, we're sitting in New Hampshire, but we get plenty of sunlight falling around the year to meet our energy needs here as well. So inherently, when the input is free,
Yeah.
the technology, as it evolves, as we get better at building it, more efficient, lower cost, because scale, increased scale brings down cost, we can provide one of the essential human inputs, energy, at a cheaper and cheaper cost. And to be specific, in the last decade or so, the cost of solar technology has come down about 75%.
Wow.
If we were talking 2 years ago, I could have said 90%. It has ticked up a little bit, like everything else, in terms of especially the cost of labor. We got to hire good people to install these systems. But the technology has gotten so much more efficient and so much cheaper as the scale has really expanded that the upfront cost, while it's a factor, so a lot of folks we install solar for will get a solar loan, essentially because that's a bunch of money to come up with upfront, and we'll talk about the incentives in just a sec. Many people will choose to finance 100% of the cost, and essentially in so doing, they will trade their monthly electric bill for a solar loan payment. So it's cash flow neutral or even cash flow positive. But it got better last year since your last show on the topic in passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a big deal. The biggest piece of legislation the US government has ever passed to deal with the climate crisis and to bring down the costs and provide some really meaningful incentives for not just solar, but any renewable energy technology, for the manufacturing of solar and wind and everything else onshore. So it did a lot, but to focus in on kind of what it means to homeowners interested in maybe reducing their cost and going with clean energy, we had a so-called investment tax credit, ITC, where any family, any business, any tax-paying entity could take the cost to install and reduce it by, it had been 30%, it had gone down to 26%, it had gone further down to 22%, and it was about to drop all the way to 10% for commercial and 0 for residential. There was going to be no tax credit left after another year. But the Inflation Reduction Act brought it back up to 30% and gave us something that the whole industry has been craving, which is some predictability. It's so hard to run a business when you don't know what the incentives are going to be next year.
Right.
So we have a 10-year runway now through at least 2032, potentially longer depending on how much clean energy is deployed, but at least through 2032, there will be the 30% investment tax credit. And it did one more really exciting thing. Did a bunch of cool things, but related to the tax credit, previously, as I mentioned, only folks paying tax bills could take that credit, a reduction, dollar for dollar reduction in their taxes owed. Now, tax-exempt entities, towns, schools, nonprofits, our soup kitchen across the river went solar, the New Hampshire Food Bank recently went solar. Now these entities can get through a direct payment the same 30% value in the form of a payment from the government. So it opens it up for a lot more folks to benefit.
So, I mean, that's huge. 30% is definitely huge. And that's 30% off the cost in terms of the loan to do the installation. But the caveat to that, obviously, is they don't get that 30% immediately, right? They're going to have to, depending on when you do the installation, you have to wait till the next tax period to be able to essentially file that.
That's right. Yep. It will come off your taxes next time you pay those taxes. So if you install it this year, it would be by April when you file your taxes for this year in the beginning of next year. But solar loans can help with that. They can take away that upfront cost, finance the project, and then pay it down bit by bit.
Yeah, so let's go through the process, of just how do you even start? I kind of went through that process, and I really feel like we got to discuss it because there were some things that I was just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So when people are essentially ready to kind of make that decision of should I leverage the free sunlight and get solar panels, what are the things that they should take into consideration? Because I've heard people say, I'm going to need a new roof before I even do this. Is that even true at this point? Like, what happens?
Yeah, so there are two primary pathways you can follow. The most common by far is to put the solar panels on your own roof, or maybe if you've got some extra space out back on your lawn or in a field. So a self-generating, we call it behind the meter, because it's going to connect right into your electric panel, and you'll use that power behind the meter, which means you're offsetting the full retail cost of electricity. Every unit, every kilowatt hour that you generate yourself is a kilowatt hour you don't have to buy from the utility. So you get great savings that way, but it does require that a roof is in good enough condition. When our solar designers come out, they're going to actually get up on your roof. They're going to look at those shingles or metal roof, whatever roof type you have, and they're going to tell you pretty directly if they think that in 5 or 10 years you're going to need to replace it. Yes, you could put panels on top, and it would actually extend the life of the roof, but not by decades. And so we want to save our customers the pain of having to, in 5 or 10 years, take the panels off, re-roof, put the panels back on. You can do it. We do it for some who really want to go forward. Maybe they put those panels up for 15 years, take them off, re-roof, and then we'll get another 15, 20, 30 years with those same panels. It's a choice for a homeowner, but generally speaking, we're going to say if that roof looks too old, if it's pushing 15, 20 years already, most roofs are a 25, 30-year life, we're going to generally recommend maybe hold off. Maybe there's space we can put the panels on the ground. Or maybe the other pathway is a community solar farm. Mm-hmm. Now, we could get into the weeds of New Hampshire policy. I know the audience extends beyond our state, but for folks here in New Hampshire, there's been some challenges to deploying solar. As a consequence, in this state, we only get about 1% of our electricity from the sun. Go a few miles south to Massachusetts, and it's 20%. And our neighboring states, Vermont and Maine, are also far ahead of where we are today. That's a matter of policy. We're seeing those policies gradually change, and we are finally seeing changes that are starting to enable community solar farms. And the concept is really simple. If your roof is just too old or too shaded, or you don't have any space out back to put solar panels, a lot of us live on smaller lots, then you can instead be a participant in a community solar farm. Same kind of idea as CSAs, community supported agriculture, where you have that share, you get the deliveries every week or every other week. We get them from a farm. And then you have the benefit of being an owner of something that you don't actually have to host.
Right.
And the great thing about these community solar farms, which we've built a bunch of over in Maine, thanks to better policy. We've seen a lot of them in Mass as well, but we're finally able to bring them to New Hampshire in the near future, is that we can take the lands that you can't do anything else with, those old landfills or brownfields, some contaminated lands that you can't develop on, and we can put solar on them. And then we can bring families together who want to own. We'll first go to them and ask for 12 months of electric bills. How much power did you actually consume? Is that how much you think you're going to need going forward, or are you thinking about an electric car or heat pumps that you might increase your consumption? So we'll come up with them with what the figure is, how many kilowatt hours they're going to consume a year, and then we'll translate that to how many panels they would need to own. And all right, we'll get your 22 panels out of this 2,000 panel solar farm. Those will be yours. You'll pay that small fraction. You'll be a shareholder, an owner of that part of the total system cost. We'll maintain it for you, and through New Hampshire's, it's called net metering, we'll be able to send those credits directly onto your electric bill,
right,
and you'll get the savings that way.
Right, and you see it on your bill. There'll be a line item on the bill for
exactly.
that. I'm happy you mentioned about the community solar farms, because that's one of the things that I was like, are they finally here?
It's been slow, but they're coming, I promise.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for, honestly. That's what I would have preferred, than putting them on my roof. But I noticed that they weren't available, so I was like, okay, well, got to go the other route. So you mentioned about the backup batteries, and I kind of had this debate with, my friends also have solar panels. Do you get the solar panels and the backup battery? Do you even need the backup battery, or are you okay with just the solar panels? What are the benefits of even having the backup battery? So I want to have this discussion because, I'm curious if the backup battery is a good investment in conjunction with the solar panels.
I'm going to try not to wonk out on you too much. I get really excited about all these technologies and what batteries are already starting to do, not just for the homeowner, for our families, but for the entire grid. It's exciting stuff, but I'll try to keep it kind of to the point.
Oh, and we should also explain what the backup battery is, so that people understand. I forgot that part.
So, back in the old days, Revision's co-founder, great guy, Bill Barron, started actually building off-grid energy-efficient homes, way up in rural Maine and other places like that, which were at that time, this was in the 80s and 90s, solar was wicked expensive, but if you lived way far away from the power lines, you needed some other source of power. At that time, you'd have those old car batteries. You'd have a bank of them, reasonably reliable, but not the cleanest, not the longest lasting. So batteries today, when we talk about batteries in this industry, we're generally referring to lithium-ion technology. It's the same basic chemistry as you have in your smartphone. And these batteries have increasing power density, which means more and more capacity in the same relatively small footprint area. So a typical battery that we install, we've installed many hundreds of these, is your Tesla Powerwall. It's the size, it's about this big, it's about this thick, so it's not a big piece of equipment. It'll go in your garage or your basement. Sometimes folks will string multiple Powerwalls together to get additional days of backup power. And then we tie them into your same electric panel. Most folks will have solar as well. The benefit of that, of course, is if the power goes out for an extended period of time, if you just have the solar, the National Electric Code, not to get too wonky, but for understandable reasons, it says you can't keep generating power when the grid goes down because you might feed power back to the grid, and the folks repairing that outage might get shot.
Right, yeah.
Can't have that happening. So the solar has to get shut off. It automatically shuts itself off when there's no incoming grid power, unless you have a battery, because then it can charge the battery, and you can simultaneously charge the battery with solar, discharge the battery to keep the lights on, keep the fridge going, keep some heat coming, whatever you may need. If you have just one battery, you may only be able to do some of your loads, not everything, maybe not the heating, that takes more power, but some folks are getting multiple batteries. And what's especially exciting these days, as EVs really start taking off, is that we're beginning to see new EV models that are bi-directional, where you're not just putting electricity into the battery and driving around, you can pull electricity out of the battery to power your home.
Wow.
And this is going to become, a couple years from now, this is going to be common practice. Because the amount of power that I've got in my Chevy Bolt parked out here is enough to power our basic loads as a family for a few days if the power was to go out. We don't yet have the technology to actually pull that power in through our electric panel and power the home, but it's coming pretty fast, and the newer models are already providing that technology.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because right now what some people might say is like, well, but I got a generator. Right? Well, I can just use the generator, so what about the backup battery? But the fact that, I can have like a Tesla or any other EV vehicle essentially is that could be my vehicle and a generator essentially at the same time is remarkable.
Exactly. And generators are great. They're a great source of resiliency when it comes to keeping the lights on if the power goes out at your home. But it's apples and oranges when you compare your current generators with lithium-ion batteries, because what the batteries can also do, whether it's in your car or installed in your house, is they can start to send power back to the grid. And as we look to the grid of the future, where you're going to have what's called time of use pricing. So when demand is really high, supply and demand, basic economics, you've been in business many years. When demand is really high, the price is going to be higher.
Right.
if you can, when that price is high, be selling power back to the grid, you can get paid a premium for it. So you generate in the mornings when the sun is out, you're getting that solar panel, you fill up the batteries. In the afternoons, evenings, when the demand's really high, you either use that power so you're not having to buy it from the grid, or you even sell it back to the grid.
Wow.
And one more piece to this puzzle that just gets me so excited. We're already seeing what are called virtual power plants come online. And they're virtual in the sense that it's not one big installation with smokestacks and what have you, which is often polluting the air and harming folks' health. It's actually thousands of individual home batteries that through technology are linked together so that when the whole grid experiences peak demand, the utility companies can pull just enough power out of these batteries with permission from the homeowners, paying them a premium to pull that power out, and they can avoid having to install more fossil fuel generation.
I should have gotten that battery. Oh man, yeah.
It's still, options are still there. And New Hampshire's unfortunately a bit behind, so we don't yet have these virtual power plants as an option, but they're coming.
Right.
So.
Excuse me while I go. I'm going to go get that battery now.
Yes, ma'am.
No, this is fantastic. Wow, I'm learning so much today, so this is great. I needed this update because, as you can tell, there's so much that has happened since I did the initial solar panel recorded. So this is fantastic. So the other thing that I'm seeing, because of now this high demand for green technology, clean energy, is also an increase in demand for jobs, right? You guys are hiring. So a lot of people, and I've done a video before when the tech layoffs started happening. And people just were like, oh my goodness, we need to get out of the tech industry. This is bananas. But one of the things I said to people is like, you need to pay attention to the green technology industry, solar panel industry, because the opposite is actually happening, right? You guys are hiring. So let's talk about what the demand and why it's continuing to grow.
Thank you for that question. We desperately need more people to join this industry. So the projections are when, and I believe it's when, not if, America completes the transition to fully renewable clean energy powered economy over the next few decades. To get there, we will need 20 million, we will create 20 million new jobs.
Wow.
And we will need millions of new tradesmen and women, especially electricians, to actually build this clean energy economy. We are talking, it's been called the fourth industrial revolution. We're talking a rate of growth as we literally repower our world in a way that's sustainable, that will help protect the habitability of this, our only planet home. It is not just sort of have to, a painful transition. This is actually an enormous economic opportunity. And again, $20 million jobs is the projected new job creation that will come with this transition. Electricians alone, we are eagerly hiring wherever we can to bring more electricians online. In fact, the demand is so great and our numbers of electricians today are so low that we, for the last 5 or 6 years, have actually been training electricians ourselves. We started the first in-house, for solar company in the US, the first in-house electrical apprenticeship program. And we've taken over 100 apprentices, some of them just coming right out of school, or even saving on going to college, and Lord knows the cost of that is really high.
Yeah.
So instead of paying a bunch of money to get that degree, we'll pay you to come and work as an electrical apprentice. You'll be a co-owner of our 100% employee-owned company, and over that 4 years, that 8,000 hours, you can actually get that training and become a journey person electrician. And we're especially eager to bring more women into the trades. Frankly, we need to expand how we conceptualize the trades. We're never going to meet the workforce needs to repower our economy unless we can bring folks, women, also people of color who haven't necessarily been invited into the trades in particularly these new industries in places like Northern New England. So our success, and this is somewhat selfish here, really hinges on our ability to expand how we see the trades as a society, to tell that story that this is a good living wage. You can support a family with it. You can feel good about building, being outdoors and all the rest. Our install teams work 4-day weeks. They get 3-day weekends.
Oh, wow.
It's more efficient that way. They work 4 long days and then they get that long weekend, earn a good wage, and they're part of building the future. So in a word, yes, we desperately need more electricians, and there are all sorts of jobs throughout this new clean energy economy.
Right, and besides for somebody who's like, well, I'm not really, that's not what I'm looking for is being an electrician, what other roles are available in the green tech sector that you think that are in demand?
Yeah, so electricians and engineers are the top 2 that we're hiring for and that we see the need for throughout the economy. But it really is everything.
Right.
So we hire marketing and sales, we hire attorneys, we've just added a new in-house counsel, and those needs only expand. Managers throughout the company, project managers especially, really you name it, anything that makes a business run, finance and accounting, the full gamut is what we're hiring and what we're seeing the industry needs.
Yeah. And we're, especially with the install section of the business, do you think some of the people coming in will need to learn things like the zoning and the permitting, some part of that, some of the regulation that goes into the installations?
Yeah, that's an important part of it. The way we've organized our teams, we've got our install teams. We've also got a development team that's really mastered all of the permitting complexities, and our sales and marketing and so on. So we've got some specialists who focus especially on all the permitting complexities, and then they transmit that knowledge to the installers, who are of course going to install according to the approved permits and so on. So it all fits together.
All varies. Yeah, so if you are looking for work right now, you heard it right here. There's a demand. Revision has some openings, so make sure you go to their website and check it out. So here's the thing. Technology is constantly evolving, right? There are some times where I can't even keep up, right? I feel like today I know what's going on, and then tomorrow there's an article and there's something mind-blowing that happens. So why now? Why now should we be focusing on green technology and clean energy? Besides the fact that, we're already seeing some, ups and downs with our climate. So I don't know. Why should we start being, taking care of our planet and why it matters?
We both have young kids. We both want them to live a healthy life. We want them to experience their potential and not have to contend with the extremes that we're seeing, the extreme instability and damage that we're doing. So yes, the money's a big part of it. It's got to make financial sense. We understand that, and again, blessed to be in an industry where that fuel source is free, so we can actually save people money. But it is more than that. We were just reminded last week here in early June where these crazy wildfires, more than 400 active wildfires right now up north in Canada.
Yeah.
And the particulate matter, the smoke that blew south all across New England, all down through much of the continental United States, created some of the worst air conditions anywhere in the world. Folks like my wife with respiratory conditions, and so many people of color across this country in particular who've been on the receiving end of environmental racism, where those power plants, those chemical facilities are sited right in their neighborhoods where they've been redlined into. So folks are already dealing with this massive health disparity. And you look at the asthma rates, 5 times more likely for an African American kid to die of asthma as a kid of European descent. And then the climate crisis on top of that, the wildfires that are clearly linked to drought, to rising temperatures, which are all a function of our emissions of CO2 and the warming climate. So we're seeing folks, just in the last week, countless folks getting hospitalized, perhaps even some premature deaths because of that direct effect of our current climate challenge. And we've got to change course for our kids, for the future.
No, I agree with you 100%. And any last thing that you want to talk about before we close that we haven't already touched upon?
Well, I'm just so grateful, Flo, for the chance to talk a little bit about what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah.
I feel blessed to be doing this work, bringing my kids along to job sites and getting them excited about maybe being part of the workforce themselves in the future. I hope for any young folks out there, or not so young folks who are thinking about a career change, that you'll look at the clean energy economy. And if you have the ability to put those solar panels on your roof, by all means, or join a community solar farm. And if you have questions, please reach out. I'd be honored to help answer them.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for stopping by the studio. I learned a couple of new things, that there's exciting technology that is going to be coming out, which is obviously going to be beneficial. And thank you for covering some of the new incentives that are going on. And just thank you for being awesome.
Thank you so much. Honored to be on the show.
Yeah, and listen, if there's any more updates that you get excited about that you want to share, please come back, because I love to learn, and so does my audience. So thank you so much for stopping by today. And to everybody at home, thank you so much for watching another episode of Get Tech Smart. Stay tuned for more.